So, Ms. Stone, if you can just start off by giving your full name, what your role was with the Martin Luther King Center, and the time period in which you were engaged.
Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Mernissa Stone Sumer. I'm a former executive director of the Long Beach Martin Luther King Center. I first came to the center in May 2008. I came on just as the bookkeeper. I expected to stay a short period of time and to come in and just clean up the books, get QuickBooks in order, and then I had intended to move on. I was approached by a former board member, Ms. Patrick. She came to me and asked me if I would agree to take on the role as executive director. And I actually laughed at her and I said, I'm a bean counter. I give me a budget, give me a calculator and some numbers, and you have your girl. And I laughed at her and I said, I don't like to supervise people. I didn't really come here for that. I don't think I'm the person for that role. And I got there in May. Now, this was, mind you now, at the end of July. So I'd only been there for a number of weeks. And then Tito Garcia, he came along and he joined in with her. So every day they gave me this visit to talk with me about taking on the role of executive director. So I thought about it, I prayed about it, I talked with some close friends and confidants about it, and they said, go for it, it's for you. You need to do that, you need to make that change. And I did. I accepted the role officially August 1st of 2008. I became the executive director, and it was on from there.
So now, Brother Owens, you were saying you were going into your time with the MLK Center, what your role was following Ms. Stone. So just take it from there.
I think I was actually preceded Ms. Stone. I was there from 2006 to 2008, 2 years. And I left, I think, that January, and you came in that.
I came in May.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So that's my tenure.
Okay.
Yep.
And Lisa, Ms. Hayes.
I was in between and after. So I came after Mr. Owens and before Ms. Stone, and then I was there for a little bit after Ms. Stone again.
Okay, good. And of course, you all know me. My name is Patrick Graham, and I actually served as the Long Beach MLK Executive Director from 1997 till January of 2001.
Okay.
Was part of the group that revitalized the center. The MLK Center Incorporated at the time was defunct, and we had to reincorporate. So you all are part of a new legacy of the MLK Center.
Wow.
So let me ask you this, speaking of legacy, it's a good segue into it. This time I'm going to start with you, Brother Owens, and then work my way around. What does the legacy of the MLK Center mean to you?
I think the legacy of the MLK Center to me, particularly for the people of Long Beach, is an advocate and a community center for that community. Coming out of EOC and seeing some of the work EOC did around the Long Island, I came out of there as a deputy director of field operations before I came to Long Beach. So I saw the need for the Long Beach Martin Luther King Center to be an advocate and to be an organization that stood up for the people of that community. So that's, the recreational stuff and that stuff I loved, but I thought the best thing about it was his history as kind of an advocate for people that didn't have someone to speak out for them. So I think that was a significance to me, and I think it can still be the significance of the King Center.
Good. Starting with you, Sister Hayes, what does the legacy mean to you?
Might be a little bit different from me because I grew up in Long Beach. And I remember as a kid going to the MLK Center camp when the organization was on Park Place. And I remember the building being built. I remember the very first King holiday And even the first year where we had a parade on MLK Day, and just being out of school and having a place to go. And every year that being a time where you could see everyone from the community come out. You got to get a sense of who was Black in town and who they were and where they were and people's talents. As a teenager going there and, you know, just congregating, talking with adults, different communications, whether that be community meetings, whether that be workshops, you know, learning different skill sets, and then even being able to volunteer there. And I think that legacy has really carried on. And I think it's something that's intrinsic with everyone that is from there or lives there even still, is thinking of the center as a pillar in the community, as the place where if you have trouble, if you have an issue, if you have a problem, there's always someone there that you can go to and talk with that will advocate for you and with you. And I think that in all of our communities of color, it's very important for us to have that, to be able to have a resource center, if you will. And I think we have a lot of people who have lended their talents over the years, whether it be in executive director capacity, whether it be staff, volunteers, et cetera. I think the legacy of partnership has really been very strong for the agency throughout the years.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Ms. Stone, legacy of the Martin Luther King Center. What does it mean for you?
The legacy of the Martin Luther King Center means a lot to me. Coming in as a person not being from Long Beach and not being from New York, I instantly felt a sense of community. I felt strong leadership in the board members that were in office at that time. It wasn't a hard place to fit into. I came from a very close-knit community, so it reminded me so much of home. I was able to just dive right in, get to know the people, get to know the challenges and the issues that they were facing. And what was so important to me and what stood out the most is the after-school program. I'm a proponent and an advocate for students and for those who love education, who love learning. I was very impressed at the legacy and the history that I learned of the after-school program, and then being able to immerse myself into it once I took on the position of executive director. I would say that was the highlight of my time there. Everyone knows I love children. I love learning and just networking with the various community members, getting to know those who were in the school system, taking on the role of advocate at times for the parents, for the children, working with so many of the teachers. And actually the superintendent at that time was one who really supported the center. So again, it was not hard for me to find my way, to navigate through, to learn a lot, to make some wonderful relationships. And it was just real important for me to see how the generations of children, some of the people who were working there as staff were volunteers, had gone there as children, and now we had their children there. And then all the stories that I heard of how it came to be. And another highlight, I said the children and the after school was a highlight, but it was truly a great, great pleasure for me to actually interact and work with some of the founding members. They were still around. They invited me to a wonderful breakfast one morning, and it was like my orientation to get to know. They said, you come off site, you come to our house, you come and sit with us, and we're going to tell you what it's all about. And I welcomed that. I didn't feel intimidated. I felt welcomed, and I felt that they still cared about the center, and they were interested in supporting and helping me. That's the legacy that I will always hold dear. And again, Long Beach is just very dear to me, even though I'm not able to be there as much as I would like. It still holds a warm place in my heart, and whatever I can do to continue the legacy on in a good and strong and positive way, I'm here to do that. And that's something that I would commit to do for as long as I can.
Well, I mean, what you're all talking about in different parts of your comments was really about the history of the MLK Center and how it impacted you in your roles. When you talk about, Lisa, how you, grew up there, right? It takes on a different meaning of ownership for you. Ms. Stone, when you're talking about learning about its history at the same time, right? How it changes the way that you view that which you are now a steward of. And of course, the Owens, you're talking about a history of advocacy. And so I know that as someone like Ms. Hayes, who grew up in Long Beach and actually was able to attend the Martin Luther King Center in its earliest stages, what actually its legacy really means to me is not just the idea of giving and the idea of empowerment, but it's also about Black ownership.
Yes.
This organization, when it was created and founded in '67, was really about how do we have a place of our own in this new wilderness of the North, because the vast majority of those who founded the center were from the South. And they were people who experienced the civil rights movement in the South and recognized this veiled system of discrimination in the North, and knew that they had to have a place for their youth, but also for their community. So I appreciate all of that and appreciate it more now that we're on the other side of it.
Yes.
So with that, we're talking about many of the things that community faced to get here. But let me ask you personally, as a leader, and I'll start with you, Ms. Stone, what was some of, at least one or two of the biggest challenges you faced as an ED?
I can honestly tell you it was coming into the center after the Sandy storm, the superstorm Sandy, coming in and seeing all that we had, all worked over the years collectively had put in place was destroyed by a storm, physically destroyed. It was an overwhelming feeling. I was away from the center a couple of months prior. I had taken a leave a couple of months prior, but once hearing of the storm, I immediately tried to phone in, couldn't find anyone by phone, so I drove over with a carload of food, vegetables, fruits, and meats, and all those things. And I found James and many of the community members hard at work preparing meals for people who could not fend for themselves. And within the next 2 or 3 days, I found myself there every day for a series of weeks, just helping and supporting, working with the volunteers. And before long, I assumed my role, went back into my office, the executive director's office that had really not changed. It's up on the second floor, so it hadn't gotten any damage. So I went to work. And the greatest challenge was to convince the Nassau County Youth Board and the county legislator for our district at the time to convince them that we had pursued through all of this, that children still came, did their homework. It was still a place, a vibrant place where people came and they found help. So again, I call it, it was a power breakfast. I was invited by the executive director at the time of the youth services, the legislator. We met for lunch. Oh, actually, we met for an early breakfast at Mitchell's in Oceanside. And they said, just tell me, what are you going to do? How are you going to turn this around? I came prepared with binders, with books, with things, written up. And I didn't have to turn a page. I just talked and I spoke from my heart, and they agreed to give us a chance to restore the funding. It was supposed to be temporary, but it ended up, I got a phone call just before Christmas Day from the legislator that tells me, you go back and do what you started, what you have been doing, and we'll see to it that you have all the funds you need to continue. So there it was. They made the challenge, and what looked impossible, they made it possible. And from there, We were able to establish the certified program, the license program through the New York State Department of Ed, and so many other good things happened as a result of the Sandy storm, which should have wiped us out, but it only made us stronger. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to be there at such a vulnerable time.
Good. Thank you for that. Brother Owen, one or two of your greatest challenges as an ED?
Wow. So I think for me, the greatest challenge, and when you guys are talking about the history of MLK Center, it made me, especially the legacy you talked about, the connection to the South. When I think about that, and I think about how you had that experience all over Long Island. So when you had the MLK in Long Beach, you had Percy Jackson in Hempstead. You had some of the other things in other places. And I think they all had the same challenge that I faced, which eventually became, how do we maintain that ownership that you talked about? And how do we manage it beyond the anecdotal and beyond, we're doing a good work, but how do we start to do a good work well? And I found that was one of my biggest challenges in terms of just, how do we get everybody in line that the nostalgia is not going to get us through. That's not going to get us the funding. That's not going to maintain the funding. We need real partners. We need real programs. And sometimes the clash was with some people like, this is the way we've always done it. And having to say, you can't do it like that anymore, or we won't get funded. So for me, that was the biggest obstacle. Lisa was kind of around and she remembers that was the biggest obstacle. I remember one of the things that stood out to me when we went, and this is the perception, we went to, and I can say this on the call, they can edit, but we went to City Hall with Miss Patrick to have a conversation about redoing the gym and everything when I was there. And person was the city manager at the time. We talked for about half an hour. He had two other men in the room. And he said, Mr. Owens, I'm gonna tell you, we have $100,000 for the center. And we just never gave it to them because we didn't want to give it to them, because we didn't think they were gonna manage it right. And that broke my heart. And I think about how many times that happens. So even in the work I do now, good work is great, but good work well is better. So that was my biggest issue, my biggest struggle, to make sure we dotted the I's, crossed the T's, and actually did the work in a contemporary fashion that matched what everybody else was doing in the city and in the country.
Sister Hayes, for you, it sounds like you're living through some of this actually with both Brother Owens and Sister Stone.
Definitely. I think my comments on the challenges probably piggyback very much off of theirs in very much the same way. I tend to approach challenges as opportunities. And I think the one thing that I did notice more than anything that kind of permeated through everything was just people's mindset, holding on to old habits and behaviors, and this is the way that we've always done it, or this is what worked for us in the 80s or in the 90s, and it's a new mindset. And so getting people to adapt to that and kind of move with the cheese, so to speak, and really grasp change is always a challenge. But I took that challenge and I feel like I tried to transfer it to the people. Is very similar to what Ms. Stone said. I talked to people. I said, hey, this is the problem that we're facing collectively. Here are some of our options. We can do what we've always done, and this was the result, or we can try something different. And I took that approach not just with parents, but also with the youth. I gathered them together regularly and said, hey, this is the type of programming we've done before, and these were the results we got, and here's some other things. If you don't like them, then you can at least say definitively you don't like it. But if you do like it, then we can pursue it and continue it, and then maybe grow and build on it, and we can try new things. So it got them to open their minds up to trying new things and working together collectively. The mindset too, when you're dealing with communities of color, obviously, we're kind of all walking around with some, even if it's low grade depression, or, we've got defenses and walls up just because of being Black in America. And so now you've got all of these young people coming into a space together, and they've got their defenses up. So getting them to do things.
Sister Hayes, hold it right there for 1 second.
Yep.
If you type, just put it on mute because we can actually hear that pecking.
Okay. Okay. If, you know, so once you get them all together and you start challenging them and challenging parents, like Mr. Owen said, not doing those things in a reactive sense, but mostly being proactive and not doing what's anecdotal and dealing with, you know, what are the symptoms of issues and really driving to the deep root cause of things. You start to build different types of behaviors and relationships. So getting the young people to work together in groups, getting them to acknowledge their successes as groups, getting them to use words and compliment one another, getting them to control their reactions to things. So we had them doing things like yoga and cooking and, you know, doing group activities as opposed to things like maybe just even to some extent we cut out basketball for a while because they were doing a lot of one-on-one, which is solely individual competition. So we shifted more towards these and we got different results. We got parents to come in and volunteer, even if they were just watching the hallways and keeping people from running, because it created that community environment that many of us maybe experienced growing up in church, but a lot of these young parents don't have church environments where the kids are able to interact with adults in the community. So I think the biggest challenge, and one thing that I think that we did well, and it helped because, you know, even going back to talking about the legacy of the center, is that people expect and continue to expect the MLK Center to level them up. And I think it was Mr. Owens that, you know, created that tagline, expect more from us. And I really respected that because it permeated. And it was something that I continued to say to people, you know, expect more, not just from us, but from yourselves as well. And I think they really did raise the bar and meet the challenge.
Good. No, I appreciate all of your perspectives when it came to those challenges. And I'll tell you that as you all Long Beach MLK Center, I think the largest challenge I remember facing was just getting the actual center restarted. We had community members who I will tell you were brave and courageous, volunteered their time when the center actually went defunct. And we formed a plan to recreate that. And part of that was to actually get funding again. And believe it or not, the funder who first stepped up wasn't the youth board. It was actually the United Way of Long Island. And from there, we began to rebuild it. And of course, one of the reasons that we had to restructure is because there were also obviously some legal issues. There were also financial issues. Mm-hmm. And so I think that that's one of the challenges that I think most people don't understand, how difficult it was to get restored faith back in the MLK. Yeah. But we did it with local people. And I think that that's a true testament to the talent that's in this community. And I'll say the other challenge too, even I faced, was just being naive. I was very young, 26 years old, the same age that Martin Luther King was when he took over the bus boycott, Montgomery bus boycott. And what I can remember is that there were a lot of politics associated with the center because it was the center of the North Park community. Yeah. And so with that, you had a large, at the time, Democratic machine. And so dealing with those politics around the center, in some ways being naive actually benefited us, because I truly believe that people will do the right thing just because it's the right thing. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes that does help. You know, they always say that God protects what? You know, babies and fools. And so there's a reason. And so I think that that period of time really said something about what this community needs to do and can do when put into a corner. Hopefully we don't have to go into any more corners,
Hopefully.
which is another issue that I think we're all dealing with across this country.
Mhm.
So with that, I want you to all think about this question, and I'll start with you first, Brother Owens, and it is, what is your single greatest strength as a leader?
Wow. I think
You got
James,
two points.
we go back and forth on this. My single greatest strength, particularly as related to when I was there, was developing a strategy and thinking strategically about how we move forward, and understand you can't always think emotional, and sometimes you got to, sit back and really figure out, how we're going to get this done. And I remember what motivated me most when I got there, Brian, who's still there, they were showing me around the center on my first day. And Brian he was standing next to one of the workers, and they were saying, we do this here, we do that here. And one of the, at that time, the gym wasn't painted, the backboards are like big wood things. And Brian looked at the person, and they said, tell Mr. Owens all the stuff we do here. And Brian looked at him and said, you're going to change my life, but you can't paint the walls. And walked away. And I knew right then I needed to renovate the center first in order to get the people around us. And we went that night, James and I went to a board meeting. And James was like, you got to talk. Let's strategy. Let's find out what's going on. And someone stood up then and they put out a vote to redo the floor in the gym. It was $96,000. I remember this. And they were ready to vote. And that's when I interrupted. I said, I'm the new director here. And we had seen the docket. Strategically, we had seen the docket. We knew it was on the docket that day. We proposed, no, we could do that floor for 56. And we can have a floor that kids would design themselves. And that city manager said, okay, let's talk about that. Well, Mr. Owens, can we talk? I said, we already have an appointment to meet with you on Monday on your calendar. And he laughed about it. They said, okay, tell you what, we're going to table this. And I saw the guy upset. We're going to table this until Monday. And when he did that, the other guy who was a friend of ours, the other councilman said, look, were we about to vote on 96 today? They said, yes, that means we have it, yeah. Okay, so I'm putting it out right now that if Mr. Owens does find the floor of 56, we give him the whole 96 so we can renovate the whole center. And then the last piece we asked strategically, can we have also, do we redo the bid? Because we want to own the bid so we can pick the contractor. And they looked at us like, why would you want to do that? I said, because that's what you do. So they said, okay, they gave us that. And then when you look at the center, when we got the new gym floor, the walls painted, the new backboards, the scoreboard, all that came from that meeting. Because now we had the money to do that. And that was actually the $100,000 that they weren't giving us. So I think my strength there as a leader is to look strategically and how can we get this stuff done together in a way that we even make our enemies work for us.
Sure. So I liken what you're saying to how Jesus first had to feed the flock in order for them to hear him.
Yeah.
They had to see visually, right, what possibilities were before they could actually engage you spiritually. Yeah. Got you.
Yep.
Sister Hayes, for you.
I would say in terms of a strength, I don't want to be a little bit of a copycat, but I think I'm gonna also talk about strategy, and I think it's very critical for anyone that's in this role. The point that you were making, Patrick, a little while ago about the politics. There was some talk about, trying to get funding. There's a lot of balancing that has to go on when you're acting as the ED. Just even dealing with personalities of people in the community, people that may have been there before, dealing with staff, dealing with expectations of any and everyone that comes into contact. So strategy is very important. Being able to see the big picture, I think, is something that I'm very good at, because understanding the flow of the financials, also balancing that with the expectations of the community, and then balancing that with what your output is going to be. Like, you know, if we're a youth center primarily, then any and everything that you do has to always tie back to who are we producing? Who are we raising? Some of the young people that come through to the center spend the majority of their time there. So you have to know that every single person that you invite in to speak to them, to interact with them, is influencing them. That person is becoming part of their lives. So you have to be very intentional about who you bring in to, you know, to influence them, what the messaging is, and what you want them to be left with and to take away. So for me, it was building out programming that was elaborative, that would grow step by step with them and allow them to challenge themselves along the way. Also balancing that with, you know, where are the opportunities for us to get money and to get funding, and also to get people to come in and be involved. I think being able to delegate is very important as well. Being able to establish a solid team, because, you know, when you have limited funds, you may not be able to get the exact staff that you want. So tapping the shoulders of people that you know have certain skill sets, being able to network and get those volunteers to come in, I think is something that I did very well.
Good. Now, so what we're really talking about, I think that both of you really exemplify in that answer. It is not always what you do, but how.
For sure.
Sister Stone,
Yes.
one strength you want to talk to us about.
Yes. Being at the Long Beach Martin Luther King Center helped me to realize, even more so than prior work in the corporate environment, is that I'm a good listener. I'm a good listener, and I have patience, and I'm not impulsive. I'll wait for the strategic opportunity to reply or respond to what's going on. At times, my humility may have been mistaken for weakness, but I demonstrated in just doing and making things happen. I was able to demonstrate that my humility was simply the fact that I know how to respect people. And I will respect you where you are, and I will meet you where you are, and I will strategically create an environment and a relationship with you that no matter how you come, no matter which part of the town, the city, or the state, or wherever, a family, a parent, a child, no matter which direction you come, I find a way to interact with you where you feel like you've been heard. You feel like someone cares. So I would also say a strength is my impartiality. I'm able to, and the Long Beach Martin Luther King Center taught me well, is to be impartial, to listen to all sides, and to make decisions and to make strategic moves that will benefit all. And when some are not able to be accommodated, helping them to understand that everything can't always be one way, but we have to do things collectively because we're here as community. And in a family, not everyone gets what they want when they want it. But if we do things well, if we listen to one another, and if we respect one another, we can come together and make things happen, and we all can benefit.
Good. I think that too, what you all allude to is growth. So you learn, you grow. I think as leaders, that's always got to be the case. So when you talk about strategy, about listening, it really does take a collective, right? Because you can't lead yourself.
That's it.
And as I think about everything you all said, I'm trying to really differentiate who I am today, right? The guy who can raise 42 million in a year versus the guy who struggled to raise 100,000 in a year, right? Two different people. So I think though the one thing that I do say is a strength is that I am able to provide vision, but I'm very interested in how you got here. Meaning I'm very interested in the history of it in order to make that vision more palatable, because we got to meet people where they are. And so I think that that's something that definitely, I think I cut my teeth on with the Martin Luther King Center.
Yeah.
So with that, we talked a lot about history. We got just 2 questions for you as we're getting ready to wrap up. And from a historical perspective, in 1975, there were 3 entities who were vying for control of what we know as the Martin Luther King Center. At the time, there was the city of Long Beach, the EOC, and the community that was advocating for a community board. And at first, through several meetings, the EOC was going to be that entity under the protest of the city of Long Beach. And what ended up happening, though, interestingly, is that the community came out in force in 1975 at meetings in the heart of Nassau County and said that we really wanted total, intimate community control because it was these migrants who fought for it. Ann Irvin, who was the former executive director of the Nassau County Youth Board, said trying to award it to the city or EOC at the time, she said, was a mistake as they were learning what community development was really about. I even entitled a section of my dissertation on this as the mistake. And today, we talked a lot about that notion of ownership and that community at the time that lived in Long Beach, these Southern migrants, understood what it meant to own something. So if you think about that history and you think about today, if each of you, 1 minute, tell me why you think the notion of ownership with the MLK Center is still so important. I'll start with you, Sister Hayes.
I don't want to go first on this one. Ownership is important because I'll start here. I have on the side now, I have a nonprofit that really talks about our image and who we are. Ownership is important because we don't own our image in America. And for us to be able to own it, we have to be able to say and set our own standard. We are constantly, as Black people, trying to defend our Blackness in white spaces. We need a space where we set our own standard, we set our own bar, and we set our own systems of measurement, and that we are evaluated amongst ourselves based on those things that we've defined and agreed to by ourselves. When other people define who we are, they can also define who we are not. In that way, they can also take down or limit us, limit our possibilities because they don't feel that we're capable. When we create our own spaces, we can say that there truly are no limits. The level of encouragement that we're able to have becomes exponential because we share an experience and we share a struggle that's common and united, and we know how to speak and encourage from that point of view. To turn over that ownership to people who are not part of that struggle, who have not come from a common denominator, means that there are people that have their own, and not in a negative sense, but they have their own filters around what it means to grow up in certain neighborhoods. People within Long Beach is a very small place, but we did economically and socially. North Park is still secluded in a lot of ways, where things that happen even in North Park versus West Home versus the West End, the East End, the canals, it's different pockets of community and experience. And the people that are in those communities should be the ones that really govern and be able to act as a governing body for the others that are there. I think for our culture, it's very important for us to establish legacy and culture and tradition that is not always whitewashed, but allow us to establish something, even if our history is, I grew up in Long Beach, even if it doesn't go back, generations to, some country or roots in the South, it could just be, I'm from Long Beach. I think that's why it's important for us to maintain the ownership within the community.
Good. And by the way, my folks are from the red clay of Alabama.
Mine too.
But I am still identified as being born and raised in Long Beach.
That is correct.
Owens, briefly, same question.
I think the question of ownership is almost like a trick question. Ownership because you want to own it, And I think we should own our narrative. We should own our story. We should own our future. We should own our past because it's ours. It's just that. And also what comes with ownership is responsibility and capacity. See, when you buy a house, you got to learn how to cut grass. You got to learn how to fix gutters. You got to learn how to paint. You got to learn. So with ownership comes responsibility, which builds your capacity to become a better owner and to own more. And I think that's the only way we can move with our young people to take them to that next level is they have to see that this is yours. And we fought and we preserved this for you so that you could have it. And I think when we do that, we're moving at a different, to Lisa's point, that allows them to walk into City Hall and stand tall and not cower and not scratch and not itch, but to say, something, that part of Long Beach we own. And that's ours. I was always beyond just the owning our vision and owning our mission. We should own the land. We should own the building. We should own the houses. And I think if you move like that, you move differently.
Sure.
And then you're not in these offices begging for money that should have been yours in the first place. That infuriates me.
But doesn't ownership do something for you in terms of making you know and understand you belong here?
Yeah.
Right?
Because I decide who belongs here because I own it.
Yep.
You own it. That's right.
Which means I can also kick somebody else out.
That's right. Or not let them in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sister Stone, briefly, again, the notion of ownership and the MLK.
The notion of ownership, and specifically with the Long Beach Martin Luther King Center, it gives the community a sense of autonomy. It gives the community as a whole the feeling that I've invested in the success of this place. So therefore, I care what happens. Therefore, I respect it more. Therefore, I will work harder at making things happen more and in a greater and in a better way. How better can anyone else decide what I need than me?
Yeah.
You don't understand me as a person. You don't understand fully where I come from. You can perceive, because I grew up in Long Beach or wherever, but you don't know my story. You don't know what I really need and what I really want. Mm-hmm. It's better for me to define that. And I say that meaning it's better for those who are in the community, those Southern migrants who know what it's like not to have anything. Yeah. It's such a wonderful and a beautiful opportunity and a good thing to know that you were able to be a part of something that succeeded. You were able to define and determine the future of children. You will change the direction of families, for generations to come. So it's so important that ownership, like as Mr. Owens said, the land, the building, the programs, the mission, the vision. When you own something, and I love the way you put it, Brother Graham, that when you own something, you learn how to keep it. and it gives you greater capacity in other areas of your life. So if you do well in Long Beach, if you do well at the center, it only makes you stronger in your own personal lives, in your own families, and in the community at large outside of Long Beach.
You know, as we get ready to wrap up, what you all are talking about reminds me of a couple of things. One of the number one phrases I heard as I interviewed some of the original founders of not just the center, but also individuals who fought for Black autonomy here. Because remember that many of them were brought here as the help.
Yes.
And they decided that this was going to be a new home. And so they wanted more than to be the help of their white brothers and sisters. But they wanted some of this newfound empowerment, this new energy. They weren't just civil rights advocates. I'm going to tell you that many of them were Black power advocates. And when they came and they decided that they wanted to change their existence here, when they thought of the Martin Luther King Center and its creation, the one thing they focused most on was that not only did we have to have a place, they really wanted to own the place.
Yes.
And so part of that legacy is within us, but we have not yet achieved it. And so as I look at today, I will tell you, and I don't have to worry about political fallback myself. Understanding that history, I can tell you that there is absolutely no reason why the city of Long Beach, Nassau County, of a pen with community development funding and others could make the Long Beach MLK Center owned and operated by a community board. There is no reason why, because this is the reality. It would not exist if it wasn't for the vision of those individuals who came before.
That's right.
And their vision was actually that they would have something of their own.
Beautiful.
So with that, I'm going to ask you to leave us with one thought. Your parting words, one or two sentences, as I am actually past the time I promised. So I'm going to start with you, Ms. Stone. One or two sentences, something you want us to remember about this conversation.
I want us to remember the common things that we've shared in our own individual experiences at the center. And I would not want this to be our last time talking about it. And I would like us in our own ways that we can to be there, to make the difference and to make certain that this legacy lives on and that ownership ultimately becomes a reality.
Brother Owens, one or two sentences.
Yeah, mine is going to be real quick. Nehemiah faith. Don't be afraid of the enemy. Remember the Lord who is great and glorious. Fight for your brothers, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your homes. Fight. For me, that's it, because that's where I'm at right now. We need, if we can't do it at this time, we'll never do it.
That's right.
Indeed. Oh, I think for me, I'd say it's all about collective work and collective action. My mantra that the kids know me for is teamwork makes the dream work. And that's really all it's about. It's about everyone pitching in, lending their talents and their time towards really a collective vision and ensuring that we have something that we own and can call our own in our own community.
I want to thank you all.
Thank you. That was great.
Thank you for this time. And what you all remind me of is that we're made for this moment.
Yes.
And this is our moment.
Yes.
And it's our time.
Our time.
And I'll be honest with you. I'd rather go down swinging than to stand afraid.
That's right.
So what I pray for you all is that we continue to see you prosper, see the MLK Center prosper. And please know that even myself being at times 400 to 600 miles away,
Mhm.
I think about that community center every day. And there's probably not many times that I don't get calls, at least now, probably about once a week, it seems. I found myself even writing a press release. And I remember saying to myself, you know, once you are part of the Long Beach MLK legacy, you are always a part of it.
It's forever.
It's forever. It's a forever commitment. So again, I want to thank you all for taking the time this evening. Sean, thank you for hanging in there and acquiescing to our discussion style. And again, God bless you all. I hope to see and meet you soon. See you again, meet you soon in person.
Yes.
And with that, we will do something like this again.
Great.
Looking
Thank you,
forward to
Patrick.
it.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone. Good to see you all.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Thank you too.